Good evening there, everybody. What is happening? Hopefully, y'all are having a wonderful day today. So, when it comes down to it, I thought that I would give my little fight review, or not fight review, excuse me, but my little fight prediction of the fight, of course, that is going to be happening this weekend. Not really the biggest of fights, but an interesting fight nonetheless, because, of course, this is going to entail one of the bigger pound for pound overall boxers, in my view, in the sport of boxing. I don't know if I really want to say star because I don't know if Josh Taylor is necessarily one of the bigger stars in boxing, just when you talk about in terms of a monetary perspective. But he is a person, all in all, that does attract us, a certain amount of the audience. I do think, all in all, that a lot of people do know who Josh Taylor is, especially ever since he has been on the come up in the 140-pound division. And now, of course, he has became, recently the completely unified 140-pound champion. And he has every single one of the official belts at 140 pounds. And when he beat the people at 140 pounds, I thought that it was a very decently competitive division. You had Victor Postal, Jose Ramirez overall, O'Hara Daves, I believe overall that was on his resume as well. Josh Taylor has a very decent resume for the 140-pound division. However, what I will say is this. I do not have Josh Taylor within my top 5 pound for pound. And I know a lot of people, they'll say, wow, really? That's a little bit crazy. Why would you not have him there? He defeated Jose Ramirez, who was undefeated, Regis Prograis, who was undefeated. Victor Postal was still at a very decent point in his career. He defeated some other very decent, undefeated fighters. Why would you not have him overall within your top 5 pound for pound? Well, I think Josh Taylor is a very skilled fighter. I think all in all that, he is a very complete fighter. I would be lying if I said overall that I was not very impressed with him. I do think he's a very impressive fighter. But for you to be within my top 5 pound for pound, I think that you have to debatably, at least at one point in time, maybe have defeated at one point in time a top 10 pound for pound fighter, or at least done something that was extremely dominant within your career against a very decent class of fighters, or be exceptionally skilled. And I think that Josh Taylor, when it comes down to it, I think that he is exceptionally skilled. I think that he is a great boxer, no doubt about it. But if you're just counting, fighters that are within my top 5 pound for pound, I have Canelo Alvarez at number one. At number two, at the current moment, I probably would have Alexander Usyk. Would I put Josh Taylor on either of those guys' levels? Not necessarily. At number three, I would either have, Crawford, Spence, or Tyson Fury, whichever order you want to put them in. That's your business. Would I put Josh Taylor ahead of any of those guys? No, not necessarily. I don't think he's on the level of any of those fighters. And the big thing is with Josh Taylor for me is that even though I think he is a very talented fighter, and a lot of people they say, oh, well, Josh Taylor doesn't really get the credit that he deserves. And it's very interesting that you see a certain amount of these channels that, they try to gas up Josh Taylor, especially these LDBC and new media channels. They try to gas up someone like a Josh Taylor, but someone like a Vasily Lomachenko or a Tyson Fury or Alexander Usyk or Canelo Alvarez, they don't seem to like that much. Now one has to ask themselves, why overall are they gassing up Josh Taylor, but they overall don't like Tyson Fury or some of these other Caucasian or Latino fighters? The answer to that, because if Josh Taylor were to move up to 147, they more than likely know that Terrence Crawford or Errol Spence Jr. or whoever gets a hold of them, him more than likely overall is going to beat him. It just is what it is. And basically they can say that, oh, well, Terrence Crawford or Errol Spence Jr. just defeated a top 5 pound for pound fighter. Now, I'm not necessarily saying that I'm not putting Josh Taylor on my top 5 pound for pound list or within my top 5 because, overall I just don't want to give Terrence Crawford credit or anything like that. But what I will say is this. For you to be a top 5 pound for pound fighter on my list, what that means is that not only are you transcendent within one weight division, but more than likely you're transcendent within a few weight divisions. And do I think that Josh Taylor would go to 147 pounds right now and 100% officially win a title? I'm not so sure about that. Would he beat Terrence Bud Crawford? I doubt it. Would he beat Errol Spence Jr.? I doubt it. Would he even beat that of a Yordenis Ugas? I'm not so quite sure about that either. I think that Josh Taylor is a great fighter. I think all in all that, especially with what he's accomplished, even if he retired today, he would be a first ballot Hall of Famer. I don't think that there's any doubt about that. But I do have questions about how transcendent he would necessarily be within a few weight divisions. It just is what it is. But anyways, just to talk about it when it comes down to it, of course, he is not facing someone at the welterweight division. He is not facing a Terrence Bud Crawford. He is not facing an Errol Spence Jr. He is facing that of a Jack Catterall. And Jack Catterall, I believe, is a fighter from the UK. I believe he is from the side of Britain when it comes down to it. And all in all, he is an undefeated fighter. I believe that he is 23-0 with 16 knockouts when it comes down to, or maybe, no, I believe that he's 26-0, with 13 knockouts, But anyways, when it comes down to it all in all, Jack Catterall, of course, when you take a look at a certain amount of British fighters that end up fighting a lot of top-tier fighters like that of a Josh Taylor, of course, there's not a certain amount of people that usually pay attention to it because Usually these British fighters, they don't tend to be the most overtly talented. Sometimes they tend to be a little bit too stiff. They may not always have the highest boxing IQ. But what I will say about Jack Catterall is this. I think that he is better than out of the average British fighter that I just see come out of the lineup. He is a little bit slick. He is a person that does not have bad head movement. But the big question is this. Do I think that he has enough talent to beat that of a Josh Taylor? No, personally, I do not. I think overall that Jack Catterall, what he really reminds me of, just in terms of his style, he reminds me almost of basically a wannabe Billy Joe Saunders, just as Billy Joe Saunders was 10 times slower when it came down to it, and a person all in all that had nowhere near as good a feet or overall as fast as feet. That's what he really reminds me of. He tries to box in the middle of the ring quite a bit. He does overall try to be a little bit of a slickster, and I don't think that that's always necessarily a problem. But when it comes down to it, do I think that he's necessarily going to be able to outslick Josh Taylor? No, I do not. There's not one area that I think that Jack Catterall beats Josh Taylor in. I think that Josh Taylor beats him in every single category. I think he beats him in hand speed. I think he beats him in athleticism. I think he beats him in punching power. I think he beats him in head movement. I think he beats him in defense. I think all in all that he beats him in footwork and foot speed. There's not one category that I would give Jack Catterall over Josh Taylor. And that's why I more than likely believe that Josh Taylor is going to win this fight. Because Josh Taylor, from what I've seen, takes every single fight seriously. I don't think that he's underestimating Jack Catterall. He said that he has a certain amount of respect for him and that all in all that if he is not careful, that Jack Catterall could give him a lot of problems. So Josh Taylor is taking him very seriously, which in my opinion he should. Jack Catterall, in my opinion, he's not someone that has any more than a 20 or 30% chance against Josh Taylor. But if you underestimate him, this could be a Teofimo Lopez versus George Kambosos Jr. situation. So like I said, Josh Taylor is going to have to be careful, but I believe that more than likely Josh Taylor is going to outbox him. I think that more than likely he's probably going to stop him within about 7 to 9 rounds. I could be wrong. We'll see what happens. I wouldn't be surprised if it ended up going to decision, but more than likely Josh Taylor, in my view, he's just going to completely outbox him. Jack Catterall more than likely is probably going to keep it overall in the middle of the ring. More than likely he's going to try to outbox him and outslick him. He's a little bit heavy on the front foot when it comes down to from what I've seen, which can affect your movement, especially overall when you're trying to get out of the zone and avoid punches. I think Josh Taylor is going to be too fast for him, too powerful. I think that more than likely Josh Taylor, he can box in the middle of the ring. One thing I'll say about Josh Taylor is this. He pretty much can box overall in whatever dimension you put him in. He can box very well on the back foot and on the outside. He can box very well on the inside. He can box almost very well, anywhere that you put him. Josh Taylor, the only thing I would say about him, even though he doesn't have bad power, I don't know if I would necessarily say that he has A+ power, or A grade power. It's around that, well, I'd say that maybe you could give him about an A-, because I've seen him hurt opponents and push people back, even like a Jose Ramirez or Regis Prograis. So I'll say that he has A- power. I think that that's fair to say. But when it comes down to it, it's going to be very, very interesting to see overall how this fight occurs out or how it plays out. I believe that more than likely that, Jack Catterall is probably going to get stopped within about 9 rounds. But we'll see all in all what happens. I believe that Josh Taylor, what he's going to do in this fight, I believe that he's going to do a certain amount of the pressuring in this fight. And I believe all in all that basically, he is going to be trying to break him down incrementally. But we'll see what happens. And then, of course, the big question is, if Josh Taylor does win this fight, which I do more than likely predict that he will, as do many other people, I believe, what is next for him? Is he going to move up to 147 and face Terrence Bud Crawford or Errol Spence Jr., or maybe Yordenis Ugas, Danny Garcia? Someone like that. I would love to see Yordenis Ugas versus Josh Taylor or Josh Taylor versus Danny Garcia fight, just to see if Josh Taylor really could even handle those type of welterweights when it comes down to it. I would be very interested to see that. Maybe a Kell Brook, but Kell Brook, in my opinion, he's kind of washed up when it comes down to it. I would love to see Josh Taylor in those type of fights. That would tell me if he really overall can handle the welterweight division. Or who knows, maybe he can stay at 140. Maybe get a fight with Teofimo Lopez not too long after. Maybe get a fight with Devin Haney. Or a super fight with Gervonta Tank Davis. Because Gervonta Tank Davis, of course, has allegedly said that he wants Josh Taylor, for a little bit. I don't think he's serious, but we'll see all in all what happens. But anyways, it should be very, very interesting. But that's really about it for today. We'll see overall what happens with Mr. Josh Taylor and Mr. Jack Catterall. Should be very interesting. That's pretty much all I got for today. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll talk to you all later.